All right, we're ready to get started. Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today. As everyone knows, it doesn't need repeating, but just to state up front, we're in an unprecedented time in terms of our individual and the collective challenges that we face to our economy, to our society, to our families and communities. We believe that we have choices to make about what our future looks like, but that it's more than anything, it's important that we show up, that we get involved, that we're a part of the process, a part of the decision making, and that we share our ideas, we raise our voices, and we exert our collective power. The American Sustainable Business Council and our members and many allies and many of you have been working hard to address the issues at the federal level, pushing hard for solutions to save our economy. And at the same time, though, state and local economies are reopening now, and we believe that there are many crucial decisions that can and must be made at the state and local level. So, instigated by a piece written by Michael Schumann, who's on the call today, ASBC recognized the opportunity to bring together many leaders from across the country, from across sectors, from across different stakeholder perspectives to gather our collective wisdom and to build this strong collaboration, which we invite you to join with us as well. There's a long list of organizations that have been participating in this initiative, and we really appreciate and really have held strongly that it is by working together that we're able to really make a difference. And so we'll display those later on in the presentation. So the folks that have gathered are committed to a set of principles. We believe that it's really important to have some guiding framework for the work that we're undertaking, and that we're committed to not only sharing these ideas, but ensuring that we could work as we go on to create a new path forward and implement these and other solutions. So some of the guiding principles that we're holding is that we believe that business can and should play a positive role in society, and that business has responsibilities to multiple stakeholders, not just to investors. We believe in the importance of state and local governments, and that they have a role side by side with the marketplace to structure markets so they can work effectively, to manage the impact of externalities, and to ensure that public resources receive stewardship for the long term. We believe that not only is a sustainable economy compatible with shared prosperity, environmental protection and regeneration, and social justice, but it's essential from a moral and pragmatic standpoint that we restructure our economy to achieve this balance. And we believe that the market economy is a powerful engine of prosperity. And at the same time, the market must be structured differently than it is today for the good of all Americans and the billions of others that share this planet, and for the planet itself. We've developed a report on state and local recommendations for reopening the economy. We're intending that this report will be available on the ASBC website, as many of the other participating organizations. And we ask you to join us in sharing this out and helping us to build this further. We see this as just the beginning, and recognizing there's much work to be done to restructure our economy and implement these and other recommendations across many sectors and many issues. We have this long list of speakers today that will cover many of the top notes of the report. And we will turn first to our state representative, Paul Evans, the Oregon State Representative. And then we're going to run through over to our mayor, Wells Armstrong, and then each of our presenters, and then come back to the mayor for some comments at the end, and then hopefully be able to open it up. But like we said, we wanted to rush to get this report out, to get these recommendations out to a large number of mayors and state representatives and governors. And we really appreciate the Mayor's Innovation Project and elected officials to Protect America for being a part of that effort to help reach these legislators. And there'll be lots of ongoing work in that respect as well. So at the moment then, I'd like to turn it to, if Representative Evans is on at the moment, we'd like to turn it to you for a few opening remarks.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. First of all, can everybody hear me?
Good.
Okay, all right. What I'd like to talk about really is really three things very briefly. The first is some of the things that going into this COVID played an important role in Oregon, and I think are helpful for a sustainable work environment in general. The second piece is some of the things that we are currently working because of lessons learned out of this. And then the third are just some things that we are planning on working on in Oregon. And I certainly would welcome any ideas or support to make them better. To begin with, for good or for ill, Oregon's been in the news sometimes as becoming more and more blue. I actually think that we're not probably as blue as people think, but we certainly do try to figure out ways to solve problems. Three things really made it, I think, a little bit of a difference in how we were able to, so far anyway, contain the contagion and hopefully position ourselves to be ready to reopen. The first is we passed a paid sick time law that is very comprehensive. We also have put in place family leave. And the third thing that we actually do is we have something called Oregon Saves. It is a voluntary set aside of money that people, very similar to Social Security, except it's theirs. They can opt out, but what we found is most people have opted in. And what that means is that over the last several years, people actually ended up with a little more of a cushion than they anticipated, because it comes out of their check, it goes into an account, and they get updates every year. Those three things, I think, positioned our state to be in a little better position than we probably would have been otherwise. The two things that we have learned really out of this equation more than anything else, I think, is number one, the absolute critical nature of capital to small businesses, especially high-risk small businesses, those defined as 10 employees or less, especially in the service and the vacation tourism industry. That has had a huge impact here. The other thing we've learned is that ultimately what we have in terms of systems and structures for unemployment insurance need to be modernized. Many people no longer have a particular employer as much as they're independent contractors or in the gig economy. We have created a temporary workers fund to assist people, but as we really move forward, we're going to have to be looking, I think, more sustainable method. In terms of the future, the things that we're looking to try to put into place, number one, is restructure the way in which we do higher education funding, because the debt hanging over people's heads, especially for getting those degrees that we need people trained on coming out of a recession that we anticipate is going to be a big thing. We also are looking at something called the Western Oregon Regional Carbon Sink. It's a fancy name for a massive 1 billion tree planting program that gets back to the roots of public service, that we think both is an economic advantage as well as, because of just the nature of Oregon, an opportunity to help the fight against global climate change. And the third thing we're looking at is looking at what North Dakota has in terms of the state bank. We recognize that the private sector banks are sometimes, not because they're trying to do anything wrong, but because they are risk-averse organizations by nature, that the way to get money flowing to small businesses to get their feet underneath them again really is something that is out of sync with the way that banks generally think. And we learned this after the Great Recession. We've relearned it again, that sometimes asking banks to do things that are against their nature isn't the best way to go. So we're looking at developing a state bank. So again, those are some of the things that we're working on. Like everybody else, we're trying to step carefully and navigate this particular crisis. Nobody wants to rush out and get people sick again. On the other hand, we certainly do have a whole bunch of people hurting. And I'm just appreciate all the hard work that people are doing, and I'll try to stop there.
Thank you, Paul. Really appreciate your leadership and look forward to being able to work with you as we move these recommendations forward. So next, also, I would like to bring on Mayor Wells Armstrong from Kankakee, Illinois. Mayor?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just doing my introduction at this point, correct?
Correct. That's
Okay.
right. And we'll look for comments at the end. Yes.
Okay. I am Chastity Wells Armstrong. I was elected mayor of the city of Kankakee, Illinois in 2017. So I am located about an hour south of Chicago. I am representing the steering committee for Mayor's Innovation Project. So I want to thank them for the opportunity and allowing me to be the representative from the board today. I also serve on my Illinois Municipal League as a resolutions committee member and also on the board of directors for the National League of Cities. I'll just talk about a couple of dynamics I've had being the mayor. I'm the first African-American elected in my city's history. I'm only the second woman elected. And since being elected, I have experienced 2 floods and now a pandemic. So things have been very interesting, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've reviewed the report of the recommendations for state and local governments. And I appreciate everyone's work that has went into this. I'm interested in hearing further discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So now we're going to turn to Derek Peebles, the Executive Director of the American Independent Business Alliance. Derek?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for being with us this afternoon. I'm going to talk a few minutes, well, just a couple of minutes about Amoeba and about how this partnership has really come together with the American Sustainable Business Council, and talk for a few minutes around the slide that you all are looking at now and giving a general overview, and then include some examples of some policy recommendations. And so first, for those who are not familiar with the American Independent Business Alliance, we were founded in 2001 to build a movement that supports the development of locally owned and independent businesses. And that's what we've been doing in the past 19 years, have really been promoting the terms buy local and local first. And we've played a key role in helping those concepts and language really become prevalent across the United States. And so, and excuse me, my speech is a little bit muffled today. I'm dealing with some allergies, which is also why you all don't see me on the screen, because my eyes are bloodshot red from the allergies I've been dealing with. But back to Amoeba, what we've really been strong in demonstrating and publicizing the importance of local businesses to our national economy. And so these efforts included educating consumers and policymakers about how small businesses create sustainable jobs and how purchases from small business also circulate and multiply monies in local communities. And so that's really kind of what brought us and our group together with ASBC. We've been co-leading the Save Our Economy Now campaign, where we've been responding to the various stimulus packages that have come through the House. And so with this network that we've kind of established, we really initially wanted to focus on evidence-based research to support small business policies as we begin to open up the economy, but it quickly kind of transitioned to how we overall just reframe economic development. And so just a little bit of history. Current economic development policies really focus primarily on expansion through job growth. And so the measurement of success is based solely on the number of new jobs. And so this leads to local and national policies that encourage and support big business exclusively. So however, small businesses, we all know that small businesses provide 85% of all job growth and account for 95% of all businesses in the nation. Yeah, the economic policies do not support the small businesses in America. In fact, many of the policies created for big businesses create roadblocks for small businesses. And so the support of big business has led to the centralization of our economic power and a select few massive companies that compete unfairly with smaller businesses. And those profits are really isolated to the wealthy. And so looking at the current pandemic, it's really has exacerbated the fault lines of economic development policies and practices by fully supporting big businesses while thousands of small businesses struggle. And so we're seeing this a lot with COVID. And so looking at really kind of what we came up with, we felt that it would be imperative that we focus economic development to the retention of small businesses and really kind of direct those resources and policies to small businesses. And so looking at some of the examples of policies that we came up with, we're looking at local and state policies. And so for a local and state policy, creating effective and local policies to encourage small business retention. And so we know that there's two primary functions of economic development, and that is attraction, and then that is business retention. 95% of resources generally go towards attraction. And so we want to increase and establish policies that increase the resources going to small businesses. And we feel like a lot of that would happen in the restructuring of tax incentives that go towards companies that create jobs. And so reframing those economic policies and practices, providing those tools for local independent businesses to have a conversation about economic development in their communities and to be a part of that policy making and that decision making, but also looking at a local policy to engage local businesses, local business communities more. And that happens by redefining and reframing how business retention services are conducted. So I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, Derek. So Michael Schumann, senior economist, council fire, author, and instigator for setting this initiative on fire with ASBC. Michael.
Thank you very much, David, and nice to be with you all. My partners and I in this committee focused on three big issues: banking, finance, and procurement. And our big takeaway is that if we do these things right, there could literally be trillions of dollars of new stimulus unleashed at the state and local level at little or no cost. There's $4 trillion in state and local procurement flows. There's $56 trillion that American households have in their investment savings. And getting these moving in the right direction is critical to getting a new stimulus at the state and local level. So in terms of banking, many of us were interested in the Public Bank of North Dakota, which, by the way, is a moneymaker for the state, and particularly the fact that what North Dakota does is it takes funds that come from the outside, from the federal government or from taxpayers, and rather than putting that into global companies, it puts it into state and local banks and credit unions, and thereby enhances the credit facilities for local businesses. We also are impressed with cities like Tucson and Phoenix that have moved their banking from global banks to local banks. In terms of investment, there's lots of things that local governments and state governments can do in order to encourage people to move the $56 trillion from Wall Street into Main Street. A whole bunch of securities reforms can be done at the state level that cost absolutely nothing. But one of the simple things that both state and local governments can do is just list good local investment opportunities on their websites. That's a no-cost measure. And another thing that a state could do, and a local government possibly could also do, is create a tax credit for local investment. And the state of Michigan recently introduced a proposal to do this. In terms of procurement, we see a lot of power in state and local governments implementing reforms to encourage more local purchasing more of the time. And we believe that in the end, this proposal would save state and local governments money. The bottom line is that almost all of these things cost little or nothing, but they are bold and can get bold results if we do them.
Fantastic, Michael. And as Michael was pointing out, each of these sets of recommendations were, there was a small committee that was working on each of these and then vetted before the full set of folks that have been meeting weekly now for about a month and a half or so. All right. So now we're going to turn to Debbie Berkowitz, the Worker Safety and Health Program Director at the National Employment Law Center. Debbie?
Hi, thank you. The National Employment Law Project is a nonprofit research and policy that focuses on lifting worker protections. And I run their health and safety program. And before that, I was a senior official at OSHA. And my message for everybody today is, in this pandemic, protecting those at work from COVID-19 is critical to protecting the public from COVID-19. Worker health is public health. And to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 in the public, we must make sure that those that are working outside their home are protected from the spread of COVID-19 at work. As you know, also that workers who are now on the front lines and those that are not able to telework and will be coming back to work as the economies reopen, they are disproportionately in industries that are workers of color. And most of these workers are low paying and often undervalued. And it's really clear that if state and cities do not enact safety requirements that will protect workers at work from being exposed to COVID-19, that we can see sort of a second wave and it will continue to spread. We will not be able to mitigate the illness and the number of cases, nor will we be able to mitigate the number of deaths. And I think, just take a look at what's happening in meatpacking today, where their meatpacking plants do not implement the CDC guidance of 6 feet apart, everything we're doing, masks for people, stepped up sanitation. It really is an industry, and it's spread rapidly in those plants and back out into the community and overwhelmed, local hospital systems. So meatpacking workers in some ways are the canaries in the coal mines, and it's sort of a warning to all of us that states and cities have an opportunity now to protect the public and protect business, because you want to make sure, workers are healthy and can come to work. And it's not really rocket science. As you can see very, in little bullets below, and implement health and safety precautions. 6 feet apart, social distancing is probably the #1 recommendation, providing masks, stepped up sanitation, communicating to workers when there's a case at work, allowing them to wash their hands multiple times with soap and water, or providing hand sanitizers, increased ventilation, allowing workers who've been exposed to COVID-19 to quarantine for 14 days, and sort of deep cleaning after there's a case. And all those, basic measures will go a long way to protecting not only workers, but protecting, our communities and our businesses. I think, with meatpacking, had they implemented the CDC guidance early on, they would have been closed now for many of those plants, and workers wouldn't be sick and dying. So thank you.
Great. And thanks, Debbie. So next up, Theodora Skiadis, who's the Executive Director of Cambridge Local First. on climate and energy. Theo?
Thanks, David. Hi, everybody. So our group looked at climate and energy. As state and federal lawmakers look to rebuild the economy in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are presented with unique opportunity to put climate resiliency and the rapid transition to a just, equitable, low-carbon economy at the center of our recovery efforts. This involves the diversion from fossil fuels to meaningful investments in clean and renewable energy, weatherization and other energy efficiency measures, and distributed energy systems that enable local communities to build a climate resilient, equitable, and thriving local economy. Regardless of the types of strategies that are most appropriate for a particular state, the following policy recommendations will lead to meaningful carbon reduction and help to create a clean energy economy that works for all. At the state level, our recommendations consist in establishing emissions mandates to reach net zero by 2050, making polluters pay by promoting the creative expansion of carbon pricing policy, working with utility providers to create a resilient 21st century electricity grid, prioritizing and expanding training opportunities in the energy efficiency, renewable energy, and trade sectors, increasing investments in programs, local governments, and community-based organizations across states to support efforts to rapidly deploy needed infrastructure and create incentives for communities to welcome and host grid-scale renewable energy projects, rejecting permits for all new fossil fuel infrastructure, including new gas-fired power plants and small gas pipelines for residential gas expansion, channeling investments into coal-impacted communities to ensure a just and economically viable transition away from extractive industries for millions of Americans living in close proximity to abandoned extractive infrastructure, and promoting policies that support sustainable supply chains. And at the local level, our recommendations consist in tracking and benchmarking energy use, as continuous monitoring at the local level will help diminish energy use in the long term. Investing in energy efficiency, pursuing progressive land use policies that encourage mixed use development, investing in green and resilient infrastructure, and last, replacing and retrofitting local government equipment fleets to save energy in the long term. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Theo. And just again, to make sure everyone understands that both the slides, will be available and posted up. The webinar itself will be posted up within a day or so, and as we said, the report will be available. Well, the link will be available by the end of the slide presentation. It'll be on the last slide, and we'll be sharing that out in email to everyone as well. So everything will be available. Next up, it keeps jumping. Nicola Williams, the founder and president of the Williams Agency on food. Nicola, you're on mute. Oh, we don't hear you. Anyone else from food want to be able to take this then? Theo, you're nodding your head, go for it.
I can jump in, yeah. Hold on one second. So, okay. And Nicole, if you're able to unmute, feel free to do so at any point. Okay, so here's a little bit about food systems. I was on Nicola's team as well. The people who produce our food are facing a crisis unlike any they have ever seen. Encountering new threats sparked by COVID-19 while they endure a multi-year slump in prices for their goods, volatile trade disputes, frequent natural disasters, and climate disruption. Congress must act decisively to ensure that all farmers, ranchers, fishers, and those included in the stimulus package, particularly small and mid-sized operators and others, are not falling through the cracks. Our recommendations, which are also at the state and local levels, help to accommodate for this. At the state level, we recommend undertaking a year-long income tax holiday for locally owned food businesses, considering other forms of procurement to make it easier for local contractors that work with food insecurity to receive government funds, considering financial and non-financial incentives for local food businesses, empowering local governments, and ensuring that local food businesses, notably farmers and fishermen, are deemed essential under existing government regulation. And at the local level, our recommendations include that the government must include farmers as markets in conversations on recovery, undertaking a year-long income tax holiday for locally owned food businesses, considering financial and non-financial incentives for local food businesses, and prioritizing worker health and local safety. Thank you.
Great. Okay. And again, multiple organizations involved in pulling these together. Thanks, Sia, for pitching in there. Okay, next up, Colton, are you on? Or anyone else who's gonna, sorry, Bob Rossi,
No
you're
worries.
gonna handle. Bob
Yes,
Rossi, yes, please.
Absolutely. Thanks, David. So I'm covering water, and water protection and water access is especially timely right now as we become acutely attuned to our health and our hygiene, and water plays a central role in keeping our hands and our bodies clean. And as businesses prepare to reopen, they're going to need cleaner workplaces and more accessible hand washing facilities. Employees will be demanding this. We need them to feel safe going back to work for our economy. So we should expect demand for clean water to dramatically increase in the months to come. So our goals here are to ensure broad access to clean water, to fix our failing water infrastructure, and to protect the natural resources that feed our water system. The recommendations we distilled into 4 major categories, and there's a lot that local and state governments can do. So starting with improving access to clean water for everyone for drinking and hand washing. This includes prohibiting utilities from shutting water off for local businesses and for households that have fallen behind on bills, and that in some cases necessitates funding the cost for the utilities to restore and maintain those water services. Also investing in water infrastructure. This pandemic is highlighting a failing water infrastructure that we're dealing with. The American Society of Civil Engineers currently gives the United States wastewater infrastructure a D+ grade, and our drinking water infrastructure a D. And they cited failing pipes and emerging water contamination. I'm just going to drop those reports into the chat for you. So we want to see increased funding for water infrastructure. And I dropped that into the chat, but of course it's in the report as well. And as well as more details on all of this. On a municipal level, municipalities can implement stormwater utilities to establish funding sources for infrastructure projects. Third, to protect our most essential waterways. Something to keep in mind that the polluting industries often negatively impact downstream businesses that don't necessarily have the voice to combat that. It also impacts tourism and the overall economy. Just as an example, craft breweries depend on clean water, clearly, and they've been contributing over $75 billion to the US economy in recent years and accounting for over 500,000 jobs. And their outdoor water sports, which accounts for roughly $175 billion a year. So we want to reduce and eliminate toxic chemical inputs and regulate the use of persistent toxic chemicals, also known as forever chemicals like PFAS and chlorpyrifos that do not break down, and so they can accumulate in our waterways and in our bodies. Lastly, investing in protecting and strengthening our communities and addressing the fact that millions of Americans are drinking polluted water. So look to the report for more specifics on that. We believe that with decisive action, we can safeguard our communities, help drive economic recovery, and build long-term economic resiliency. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Bob. Okay. Next up, Jamie Cloud, the founder and president of the Cloud Institute for Sustainability Education. Jamie, welcome.
Thanks, David. And I have asked Joe Phelan, who's the superintendent of Rhinebeck Public Schools, to join me here because we appreciate that pre-K-12 school systems have been included. Most school sustainable community initiatives don't think about involving the school systems, even though all the children and young people are legally required to be with us for 13 years. And even modelers model education as a 20-year payback. which is ridiculous. Kids move very quickly when they learn about sustainability and the possibilities of a sustainable future. So Joe and I are here to talk about what can be done at the educational level. The most important thing is students and teachers offering authentic contributions to the work we need to do at the community level. Kids are required to do service learning opportunities. Project-based learning and place-based learning is growing exponentially, and opportunities for students that are both vertical and laterally embedded in the core curriculum is where we're headed. So I'm going to ask Joe to kick us off with the examples of some of the policies we've been talking about, because this is something he's particularly passionate about. Joe, the first policy.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, in terms of improving access to technology for our schools and our students, we're advocating two things. We're advocating for the provision of improved internet speed and access, especially in rural areas, perhaps through the requirement of equitable and affordable, if not free, broadband access for our students through a municipal contract renewal of cable and broadband licensing. In addition, we're advocating for state funding for one-to-one computer access so that laptop computers can be purchased by our schools for lending to every student in order to provide equity of access to remote learning and to flipped classroom learning if and when students are or can't be engaged in face-to-face in-person learning. Thank you, and Jamie, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Joe. Our students, we believe that youth leadership is a misunderstood or not well understood strength that we have in every community. Our young people are energetic, they're creative, they have everything to gain by moving toward a sustainable future, and they're not stuck in their existing mental models. They can move very quickly with new ideas. So just in the last few policy recommendations, communities are resources to schools and schools are resources to communities. In addition to fighting over taxes, we can actually learn and work together for the future we want. And we want all the time to be tracking indicators. Students can be tracking the sustainable community indicators in their places and then come together with the adults in the community to reflect and celebrate together. And that's it for us.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Jamie. All right. Next up, a perfect segue, Thomas Opal, Executive Vice President at the American Sustainable Business Council on broadband. Thomas.
Thanks, David. I think the coronavirus pandemic could not have put a harsher spotlight or a stronger spotlight, depending on your point of view, on both the impact of broadband, well, the internet on our lives, and the digital divides that have been created over time. Jamie and Joe just talked about the impact in the educational community. Obviously, those of you like me who had high school students or elementary school students or maybe even college students saw the impact of how quickly education became an online experience for good or for not so good. And it's clear that that is going to probably continue into the future. But so too, we found out just how important the internet could be in terms of medicine. As people were told, don't rush into the emergency room, don't rush in to see your doctor, call, go online, and the increasing impact of telemedicine. And just the fact that it has become increasingly, the internet has become increasingly an economic opportunity and an economic marketplace. Not just eBay and Etsy, but across the board. So we, our group came up with several recommendations that states and local governments could adopt. We clearly need help from the federal government here, and hopefully that help is coming. The biggest issue is the fact that currently the large carriers at this point frankly misrepresenting what is available. The FCC definition at this point for broadband is 25 megabits. And that clearly is too slow for the kind of bandwidth that we're talking about in this day and age. You get two students trying to learn online, you go through that pretty quickly. Among the things that, that we came up with in terms of recommendations, rural electric co-ops cover almost the entire country, 47 states. And in places they are already have the ability, the wires to get into homes in places that telecom carriers do not want to or say they can't afford to go. So incentivizing rural electric co-ops would be a huge step toward providing broadband, particularly in rural communities where 39% currently don't have access to any sort of broadband. A statewide broadband definition, you know, the mapping is awful right now. If one household in a census block is getting higher speed and the rest are not, the FCC determines that that entire census block has access, which clearly is ridiculous. That needs to change, and the states can help push this. The third is utilizing the education network, the existing education network. We have in many states, the university systems are the purveyors of public radio, public television. You can use those same education networks to provide or to help support broadband in many communities. And they can also serve as training grounds. By one estimate, there will be several million cybersecurity jobs, just cybersecurity jobs alone, that go unfilled in this decade. Those jobs pay on the order of $100,000 a year. You don't need a college degree to learn how to do those jobs. You can learn it, in fact, if you have access to the internet, you can learn the jobs online, and perhaps even better still, you can do the jobs online, so that the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of North Dakota, thank you again to North Dakota, actually lives in Arizona. So imagine the impact that this could have in rural areas that are struggling now, looking for economic opportunity. A perfect opportunity to train and provide real economic help for folks utilizing the internet and broadband. And lastly is allowing and supporting municipally owned broadband networks. 25 states, half the states, have laws that ban or significantly impede municipal owned broadband networks. So this is an action at both the state and the local level. Localities where they have authority can move now to create their own municipal networks. Where they don't have authority, those laws need to be changed at the state level. And I'll stop there.
Thanks, Thomas. And next up is Richard Lawton, the Executive Director of the New Jersey Sustainable Business Council. Richard, over to you.
All right, thanks, David. Our group worked on mobility, and this is an area that our organization, NJSBC, has been actively engaged in for quite a while now, a couple of years. And the reason is the transportation sector is one of the largest contributors of CO2 emissions. In New Jersey, it's over 43%. And since building and maintaining a system that's based on internal combustion engines, or ICE engines, is a significant portion of state and local budgets, it's an area of high leverage in transitioning to a more sustainable and healthier economy overall. But fortunately, you know, market-driven innovation and forward-thinking policies are already combining to make this transition both realistic and scalable. This transition requires shifting away from a carbon-based system by doing several things. One is investing in the modernized mobility infrastructure while maintaining and repairing carbon-based modes while necessary, but not continuing to expand them. So fix what we currently have while shifting investment toward upgraded systems. Another area that's like, you know, one of the key principles that we need to maintain is making sure that we build in equity, sustainability, and resilience into all aspects of all new mobility design solutions. And a third area that's critical to this is to make sure that we stop all subsidies for carbon-based providers and instead create incentives for the development of clean, renewable alternatives and electrification of transportation. So there are state and local policies, both current and in development, that are critical to ramping up this transition. One is through incentives designed to reward the reduction in both vehicle miles traveled and the number of trips, while also removing the subsidies currently going to fossil fuel providers. This could include placing a price on carbon and using the funds raised to invest in renewable infrastructure. In our state, New Jersey, we recently passed in January one of the most progressive electric vehicle laws in the country as a way of shifting away from ICE vehicles to EVs. And this legislation is state legislation and has three main elements. The first is, in addition to the existing federal tax incentive for EVs, this state law offers a $5,000, what they call a cash on the hood rebate, which is not a tax incentive, it's actually off the price of the vehicle, $5,000. And what this does is it makes the price of EVs more competitive with ICE cars, which in effect kind of lowers one of the barriers to consumer demand. A second part of this law mandates and provides investment for expanding EV charging stations throughout the state. And this is in key areas like multi-family dwellings, offices, and state and local office areas and downtown areas too, like Main Street areas. And why this is critical is it lowers, again, one of the barriers to consumer demand by mitigating the range anxiety that a lot of people have between charges. I actually took advantage of this law. I leased a new Kia Niro EV, and when I fully charge it, it has a 250-mile range, which is more than enough. The third area that's really critical is this law mandates and invests in transition to transition public bus fleets and school buses from diesel to EV in environmental justice communities and urban communities that suffer the most from vehicle emissions. In fact, Newark, I believe, has the third highest asthma rates of asthma in the country. So by electrifying the transportation system in areas like that, it'll help improve public health as well. So while this type of legislation stimulates consumer demand, tax credit systems also will help innovative companies get involved in building the EV supply chain while creating thousands of new jobs. And to be as sustainable as possible, these policies need to work in concert with those aimed at transitioning from carbon-based energy sources to clean renewable sources like solar, onshore and offshore wind, and advanced battery storage technologies. So all of these policy actions taken together will help us build back better and put people back to work by building a mobility system for the 21st century. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. So as we said, we're moving quickly through a lot of different areas and quite a number of policy recommendations. Again, with the idea being that we're identifying both statewide, local, and then those that are applicable at the local and state level. So Mayor, we'd like to turn back to you, if you're still there, for some thoughts on what you've heard and what you've seen on the report, and give us some sense of, what this could look like sort of moving forward. Mayor, are you still there? And then we'll jump to questions.
I'm here. Thank you, David. So as I stated, the report was excellent, and there were several things that caught my eye. So I'll start off with just basic protections. The one young lady spoke about our employees and making sure that they have protections. In my community, I'm in a diverse community, 40% white, 40% African American, and 20% Hispanic. My median income in my city is under $40,000. And as we all are aware, this pandemic has really exposed disparity. But in some parts of the country, that disparity has related to health disparities. That's not so much in my city. What I'm seeing is the economic disparity. So some of the things that I look at, when you think of an entrepreneur, some people think of an attorney, with a law firm, or an engineer with an engineering company. A lot of my entrepreneurs, what they look like are salon owners, barbers. Um, there's people that are low wage workers, and some of their barriers are access to childcare. For example, one of my engineers has 3 small children. His wife is a nurse. She is able to, by choice, because he has enough income to not go into work at the hospital at this time, so that she can stay home and take care of their children. Other people in my community don't have those options. So I think it's really important to look at what that support looks like for those workers. Many small business owners are outraged that, big box stores have been able to stay open when they were deemed non-essential and had to close. So I'm really seeing the disproportionate impact in terms of economics. Also, access to PPE. We have a metro bus transit system here. And at one point, when masks weren't readily available, or face coverings, they were not allowing people on the bus. And again, I have a lot of low income, homeless people that rely on that bus to get back and forth either to work or to a hotel, so they have somewhere safe to be. In terms of students and education, that was another good point that was brought up. My concern there, the school district has done a great job to make sure the kids are eating, because we know a lot of our children rely on going to school to have a meal. But I'm concerned about those students who need those extra support, students that may have learning disabilities, students that may need tutoring. They are, many of them are in a position right now where they're trying to put themselves through school and their younger siblings, or they have parents that may not be able to help them with their academics. And so that's problematic as well. The gentleman mentioned banking. I have several local banks in the city of Kankakee, and when I became mayor, found that we really didn't have a lot of real relationships. I mean, we bank with many of them, but we don't really have deeper relationships. And so I would like to see the better partnerships there with the local banks, and participating in the CDFIs, the community development financial institutions, because they can help our small businesses with additional funding for capital and other resources. And then finally, the larger employers in the community, I think they really need to be intentional right now. If we're really going to talk about equity, they really can be intentional in terms of having an impact with the supply chain and hiring those minorities, women business enterprises, minority business enterprises, veterans. For example, I have an auto shop that opened with a minority couple. If they have a commitment from one of the hospitals for fleet service, that further supports them. This auto shop also hires felons, ex-felons, to give them a second chance. So it trickles down into the community when we're being intentional about where we are getting our supplies and who we are supporting in the community. I also think there's been some ordinances that I've seen recently that I'm going to encourage my city council to adopt to promote more of local hiring. And so the auto shop was just an example that with fleets, if there's entities in the community that need dry cleaning, a local dry cleaner that we had, that, if that cleaners has the contract, again, it's protected, it's strengthening that ecosystem within the municipality, helping that small business owner to stay in business, helping that small business owner to be able to hire people from the community and keep them working. So those were just a few of the things that I had. Again, I thank everybody for their thoughts in the report. Dave, we can't hear
Yes,
you if you're
yes, I
talking.
would like to, there it is. It's one too many, but we thank you for those comments. There's a lot there to digest, we understand, and, but it's that kind of comprehensive thinking that we hear coming from you that we think is that pathway forward, understanding how these are all interrelated, and certainly we're certainly committed to sort of moving forward with you and the other mayors and the other state legislators, as we said. So just the beginning here. So we had a couple of questions that we've got time for here. Richard Lawton, one of the pieces that's come up is that there are a couple of comments about, you spoke a lot about EV and the like, but what about the other key sustainable forms of transportation, i.e. walking, biking, public transport, and the like? Did you guys want to address that for a moment?
Yeah, sure, David. Yeah, it didn't have room to put it on the slide because we have a number of recommendations, but it did make it into the report. And so walking, shared mobility, and goods movement, that's in there. And it's also critical too, so we understand that, especially given the fact that of all the transportation, about 15% of all the trips made are for commuting and about 85% are errands. So there's a huge opportunity to encourage more biking and walking. So that's in the report. Also public fleets, one thing I did mention is transitioning away from single-use cars to investing in more public transportation, but making sure that public transportation and bus fleets are transitioned away from diesel as they age out and invest in EVs, so it'll be healthier. One thing that's been happening for a number of cities is they've been closing off roads and turning them into pedestrian zones. And that's one thing we're recommending in New Jersey, and a number of cities are already doing that. And what that does is, especially in those areas that have a lot of restaurants, they're able to expand their capacity by having outdoor seating and still maintaining social distancing while improving their marginal economics too. But the increased foot traffic will also help other businesses in those downtown areas. So that's another recommendation. In terms of EVs, that also drives people to the shopping areas of Main Street in a more sustainable way is towns like Woodstock, New York. They've actually installed electric vehicle stations and they're free. Even though they're owned by ChargePoint, which is one of the providers, when you plug in, the municipality actually pays for electricity. So you can plug in your car and you can shop locally. Manasquan, just down the road from where I live, they do that at reduced rates. So that's another thing that all these can kind of combine and intersect to improve different modes of mobility, along with electric vehicles, and also actually stimulate local economies in a more sustainable way.
Thanks, Richard. Hey, Michael, I'm going to turn it to you for a moment. We're going to go a little bit over the hour, but for those that could stay on. But Michael, there's some questions, certainly, with the payroll protection program and the like, what a small business is. The SBA defines it as, 500 employees. And we saw a lot of abuse of that, in terms of the subsidies that were offered up, but also understanding, local has been mentioned. And there's some questions about, so how do we define and ensure, that local is actually, what that actually means? And you've been at this for a while. So helping us when we talk about building local economies, when we talk about supporting small business and inclusive manner and the like, Michael and or Derek, do you want to jump in on that? Michael?
Yeah, well, in terms of definition, I think there are sort of three useful ways of thinking about local. It basically is proximity, ownership, and control. Proximity means that the business is relatively close to the consumer. So food to farm to table would be a good example of that. And one reason to have that is for resilience, for self-reliance. It's also good for lowering carbon footprint. It's good for maximizing your local economic multiplier. The second criterion is ownership. Look for businesses where 51% or more of the ownership is vested in the community. And again, locally owned businesses, because they have local relationships, spend more of their money locally and have higher multipliers. And the third is look for control. So for example, a lot of McDonald's are locally owned, but actually because they source everything from outside the community, it doesn't contribute that much to economic well-being. So you want to look for local businesses that actually can control their own sourcing and signage and so forth. So if you focus economic development and encourage people to do purchasing and investing in local businesses, as I've just defined it, you will have a much more significant economic development impact.
Great, Michael. Thank you. Derek, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yes, I mean, I would second everything that Michael said. I mean, I do think that right now, in looking at reframing economic development, it's how to come up with policies that directly benefit the local businesses that we describe and that we serve in Amoeba. And I think I saw in the chat box that you know, there's a misperception of the term small business versus local business. And so we think a lot of those local businesses that Michael are referring to that we serve really were left out of the PPP because of just simply how we frame and how we define what a small business is. And so from a policy perspective, though, I think that we can look at various state and local tax policies that really amount to giveaways to large corporations at the expense of investing in Main Street small businesses. So I think those incentive packages should be fully disclosed. Those incentive packages that are offered to large companies interested in making job deals with communities. I think it's important that a community's residents and small business owners are fully aware of what elected officials are offering and what the impact will not only be on local business, but also on affordable housing, public transportation, and local taxes.
Great. So I just to sort of close us out now, we've got the slide up now, which takes you back to you know, the email that we've got. There's the report link, and again, we'll be sharing the webinar. We'll be sharing the report. We'll all go out in an email within the next day or so. But we're also looking for folks to sort of join us in participating in this initiative. You know, it could be as simple as you taking the recommendations, you know, and using it in your own organizing, in your own locality or in your own state. You know, and again, we're happy to connect you with others that, you know, there's many state and local organizations that are in the ASBC network and the Amoeba network or in other organizations that are participating in this initiative. You know, additionally, you know, we'd love, once you see the report, is to start sharing some additional ideas with us. You know, what we'll do is we'll try to make this a real iterative process where we can keep adding these ideas out there. And certainly as you're out there testing these out and moving them forward, then, you know, we want to be able to know about that and continue to then share broadly amongst the fuller network these ideas. You know, 3 is that all the folks, all the organizations that you know, were involved in this, and some of the other folks in the recommendations, you know, most of them have agreed to sort of work with you and work with others to help move these forward. So, you know, questions around state banks, et cetera. These are the kinds of, you know, pieces of information that we can share and connect you with additional folks that can help work with you on these, or at least point you in the right direction. So as we're saying, you know, this is something where we really all need to come together, you know, and it's through this sort of collaboration and partnership that we believe that we have the best shot at being able to make a difference here. We can't go back to the way things have run. This is not about a short-term, you know, profits at all costs. This is not about a shareholder economy. It's about a stakeholder economy, a sustainable, regenerative, just, inclusive, you know, so there is no going back, and together we can build a more just and sustainable economy. So we really appreciate and recognize again, you know, all the many organizations that had participated and are participating in this, and thank you and look forward to working with you in order to move these forward. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all our presenters, and State Representative Evans, the elected officials to protect America, the Mayor's Innovation Project, and the many others. So with that, we'll say this is just a moment, and we've got lots more work to do, and we look forward to doing that together with you. So thank you all, and appreciate you joining us.